to starting now. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's session. We are just getting some few technical things set up, and then once our presenters are here, we will get started. Okay. All right. I'm sure many of you have been typing this already into the chat, but if you'd like to continue to do this, tell us where you are hailing in from. Tell us how hot it is, and maybe what you've had for lunch or planning on having for lunch. It's noon here in sunny Santa Clara, California, and I have not had lunch yet, but I have my eyes set on some Chinese food. And we will get started as soon as our presenters are all here. I have family from South Carolina, and they also are experiencing a huge, humid, hot heat wave. And 105 degrees in Bakersfield. I'm originally from Fresno, and I know exactly what you mean. Okay. All right. So it looks like our presenter is here. Um, we have, according to my clock, it's 12. So we're going to go ahead and get started if that's okay with you, Kayla and Julia. Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So, for those of you who are just joining us, basically I asked all the all the attendees, tell us where you're from, how hot is it, and what are you are having for lunch, or if you haven't had lunch yet, what are you planning on eating? My name is Annie Yang, and I will be the moderator for today's session titled Beyond the Hype. Practical strategies for integrating AI literacy through familiar frameworks. So before we begin, I'm gonna copy right into the chat this time, just our code of conduct for today's conference, which I'm sure you all have been seeing everywhere. And then also just an email to contact us at the Gale Conference support team if you have any questions or any concerns around conduct. Hopefully, everything has been smooth for you. Just please ensure that your microphone is muted and oh, excuse me. And if you have any questions or comments for our speakers, feel free to plug them into the chat and also into the Q&A. We will be moderating them, monitoring them throughout the whole entire session, and seeing if we can answer some of them along the way. But for some of our more in-depth, maybe Q&A, we can save them for the end. The session is being recorded and it is live streamed. And if you would like to, you can also enable the captions at the very bottom of the screen for show captions. So that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce Julia Farrar and Kayla McNabb. Julia Farrar is Assistant Director, Digital Literacy and Learning Engagement, and an Associate Professor in the University Libraries of Virginia Tech. Her interests include digital well-being, literacy leadership in libraries, and strategies for student engagement. Caleb McNabb is the Associate Director for Data Education, Consulting, and Faculty Development, and an Assistant Professor in the University Libraries at Virginia Tech. She applies for training in instructional design, pedagogy, and management, as well as experience in teaching and user testing to meet the evolving needs of the Virginia Tech community. Please join me in welcoming Julia and Kayla.
Thank you so much, Anna. We are super excited to be here with you all today talking about this topic. Lots to dig into, lots to continue beyond this week as well. We do have a link to the slides available. We can get that in the chat as well. This is also available in the resources for the Zoom event as well to make sure that you can get back to things. So we'll make sure you have lots of inroads to that. So I think certainly for many of us, we're well aware, given that we all chose to be here this week as well, that AI and generative AI in particular is bringing and continues to bring rapid change in many forms, for our work, for our personal lives, for the conversations we're having in lots of different ways. And that connects to new learning needs for ourselves, for the learners we may be supporting and engaging with. But around that is, at least I'm sensing, a lot of hype induced pressure. That's something coming up in a lot of conversations I'm having, feeling like, should we be doing this or that? Do I have to do this or that? Do we get left behind if we don't do XYZ? And as in many cases, perhaps we're being asked to do new things with no new support, no new additional resources. So, in this session, we're hoping to take a breath from some of that and to slow that down a little bit. And I think for Kayla and I in our work together, we've found a lot of usefulness in challenging that for ourselves and thinking, how can we get back to some of the core things that we want to do regardless, that we've been doing in libraries for a long time, conversations we've been having? How can we kind of get back to basics, and push on some of these things? So with you all this afternoon, we would like to explore that around three main questions. So thinking about, what do people need to learn about AI and AI literacy? Who can we partner with to support that learning? And then how will we reach and engage with learners? These aren't new questions. They're not specific to AI. They are questions that those of us who think about learning and educational programming in libraries, I think, are often thinking about, but maybe we don't break it down in these terms always. So we acknowledge that these are not new questions, but they can be challenging regardless, given all the things that we could be doing at different times. Kayla, do you want to add anything to
No,
that
yeah,
question?
I think, yeah. And the exploring the way forward piece, we will be sort of ideally bridging into where you can go from here. So, yeah.
And we certainly answer those questions for ourselves from our institutional context. Virginia Tech is a public land grant university. We are getting close, I think, to an enrollment of 40,000. We've been hovering around 39-ish plus. We'll see where we end up this fall. There is AI related work happening in lots of places across campus in different forms, that the library may be engaged to different degrees or not. And we also have teaching responsibilities dispersed across the library as well. We do have a more focused teaching team, but we also have people in liaison roles across the library, people in consulting roles who engage with learners in lots of different ways as well. So we're thinking about this in a pretty distributed way, at least in our context. So that's where we're coming from on this. And we'd love to get a little bit of a sense of where folks are coming from in the room. So we have a poll. Kayla, would you be able to push that? I can look at that as well if that,
There we go.
yeah.
Perfect.
So we're asking you to think just for a moment about where you're feeling in terms of your confidence in teaching AI literacy. Take just a moment here. Okay, it looks like we're getting a pretty good chunk. So I'll go ahead and end for now, but if you have further thoughts, you can feel free to add them in the chat as well. So we've ended up with a good swath of folks in the room. Looks like we've got a good 46% of us feeling maybe a little confident, some slight confidence. For those who are feeling slightly or not so confident, I hope that this session gives you a bit of grounding to think, oh, actually, I do have some legs to stand on here. There are some things I can draw on. And for those who are feeling more confident, we would love to hear from you on things that you're thinking about. We are going to have a couple of reflection moments woven in, so we'd love to hear from you on things you're working on as well. Okay. So that then brings us to our first exploratory question, thinking about, okay, what do we want people to learn? What do people need to learn about generative AI and artificial intelligence more broadly? This is, again, a big nebulous question, and lots of different frameworks have been popping up over the last few years for AI literacy to attempt to address, what are these different groups of things that we need to be thinking about. And I think those can be really useful. I also have at various times felt really overwhelmed by like, oh, now there are all these different framework documents that I need to read. So if that's a place where you are, I encourage us to come back to what are the familiar frameworks that we are already have some grounding in, and instead think about where does AI surface or integrate with some of those things. So we can think about, for higher ed context, the ACRL framework for information literacy. I know they've had a draft revision out that does address AI more concretely in some ways. I think there's a session tomorrow afternoon about ACRL framework connections as well that I'm hoping to go to. So we can think about that. Think about state or national standards or institutional curriculum. What are the places that are already going to be resonating, the shared language that you already have, to then think about, okay, when I think about what's happening with AI, how can I integrate this into goals that I might already have for student learning? And that can be a nebulous thing to think about. So I'll give you an example of some of the things that we've thought through here at Virginia Tech. We have a digital literacy framework that we worked on around 2017, 2018. And what we have here is at the center learners who then engage with and build competency in areas like discovery and evaluation, ethics, creation and scholarship, curation, identity and well-being. Just a few little things. I know there's a lot here. But then the broadest level, or that outer ring of the framework, is then a multi-literacies approach. So in 2018, we were thinking about data literacy, information literacy, media literacy, and invention or maker literacies as overlapping lenses that we could be thinking about in terms of all of these competencies. And I think today we could absolutely add artificial intelligence and automation as another broad layer to then be thinking about these similar competencies that just then becomes an outer lens to apply to those same things. So when I reflect on what that could look like across the framework, I think about, can learners identify sensitive data to keep out of AI tools, and particularly generative AI tools? Can they fact check AI outputs, whether that's images they may be coming across in the wild of the internet, or the output of a particular chatbot conversation? Can they reflect on AI's impact on society? Can they compare terms of service if we're thinking about data privacy, but also intellectual property? Who owns the outputs of these tools? And then can it also analyze AI as a term, thinking about the way that we're using AI in discourse as a marketing term versus as a computer science term with longevity across time? So then as we think across those different areas, for me, learning priorities become much more about people's conceptual understanding around AI, much more around their ethical decision making, around what tools they may be using when, their critical reflection, no matter what they're doing, and much less about their fluency in specific tools doing specific tasks. I'm thinking much more about those broader things. And of course, the tool use is a piece of the puzzle too, but when it comes to priorities and what I want to spend my time on, I'm thinking more in this direction. Pause here for a reflection moment. If you could jot down for yourself, or you're welcome to put it on in the chat as well. Is there a familiar framework you might draw on when determining AI literacy learning goals? Or is there a priority that you already have in thinking about AI literacy? We'll take a minute or so just for a quick thought here before we move forward. And I will turn it over to Kayla
Awesome.
to think about who we work with and in what terms.
Absolutely. Thank you. And there's some great answers in the chat as well. Some good places to work from. So now that we've got a little bit of that sort of foundation that we're working from as we're thinking about some of these things, we wanted to take a moment to invite you to consider who you can work with to foster AI literacy on your campus. So first, who are your existing partnerships with? Who do you already work with a lot? So this could be really widely spanning. You may have, like we do, liaison librarians that are maybe, as Julia described, ours are dispersed throughout the organization. And so some are much more closely tied into that foundational instruction than others. But that's definitely a place that you may already be partnering. Then we've also got some other campus partners, so our Center for Teaching and Learning, as well as our Student Wellness or Counseling Center. So those may be places that have significant overlap with your organization or with your institution already. Thinking in sort of a more traditional way, maybe a writing center or a reading center or speaking center, kind of depending on what area you're pulling from there, may already be a space where you're collaborating. And thinking more specifically about just the technical aspect, if you've got a uh, technology support, infrastructure, whatever that might look like at your institution that you work with for maybe technology lending or something along those lines. And then the last partnership that we wanted to throw out here that you very likely are already involved in is partnering with different departments. So, as Julian mentioned, our um, information literacy is really tied closely into the instruction that we do in our English department and do in communications as well. Um, and those may be spaces that you're working with, but there may be other departments that are showing up for you in your context. Um, so with those in mind, thinking about where you may already be partnering, we wanted to share a couple of examples of partnerships that we've explored specifically in the context of fostering AI literacy and considering AI literacy. So, Technology Enhanced Learning and Online Strategies is a group on our campus that primarily does professional development around teaching and learning tools and teaching and learning with technology specifically. And so, about a year and a half ago or so, a little bit more than that, we embarked on an AI needs assessment with them to kind of get a sense of where both faculty, staff, employees more generally, and students, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level, are with AI use, with AI perception. So going through that process and designing those questions with them and looking at the responses to that assessment with them was particularly helpful in thinking about fostering AI literacy on our campus and was very informative for us specifically. And then a second example that we have here is artificial intelligence and academic integrity, or AI squared working group that we had on campus last fall and wrapped up early this past spring, was to think about how particularly generative AI, but AI tools more broadly as well, fit into an academic integrity framework. And that's absolutely a literacy question, right? When is something authored by you is something that ties back into other conversations that we've had for a long time around digital literacies and creation, authorship, that sort of thing. So this was a space where we were able to bring some of our expertise and experience to those conversations, working directly with both administrators and with faculty from individual departments to think about how the language might need to be updated around academic integrity to keep artificial intelligence clearly delineated so that faculty can be supported and students can be protected, ideally. Um, so with that, think about perhaps in your environment there are folks that you maybe haven't worked with before. So kind of throwing out some suggestions. And of course, the items that were in the first list, if you aren't working with those partners, we would encourage you to consider them as well. But your Office of Academic Integrity or whatever your equivalent might be, the various ways that we historically have interacted with that kind of an office may be very limited, maybe mostly around citation, but there are lots of different ways that we can have conversations with them that can help us foster this AI literacy on campus. We've also got researchers. So both researchers wearing their researcher working with undergraduate and graduate students, leading experiential learning, kind of in that realm, but also in their work doing their research. There are folks on many of our campuses and in many of our organizations who are interested in this concept of AI literacy from a more academic perspective or from that curiosity perspective as a researcher. And that would be great to be able to leverage as well. Next, thinking about new departments, is there a department on campus where these conversations are happening that you aren't often able to collaborate with? That might be a great opportunity to reach out to build that relationship. And then another potential would be student groups. One thing that came out of our needs assessment was a lot of responses from both graduate and undergraduate students that they have really vastly different understandings of AI in some instances, preferences, ethical concerns, considerations. It really ran the gamut, which was fascinating. And there are student groups who are doing different types of work on campus who may have very different needs related to developing and fostering AI literacy within their group. So if those exist, those could be a really great place to build out a partnership. So with all of this in mind, we'll give you another moment or two to reflect and think about how this plugs into your context. So, what groups on your campus are also asking questions about AI? And do you already work with them? right? Are those places where there's already an existing partnership, or would that be something that you might need to build out? And then kind of the flip side of that, are existing partners that you work with on a regular basis, maybe not having conversations around AI or AI literacy that could benefit from introducing that? So if you would, yeah, take just a moment or so and feel free again to put that in the chat or to just jot it down for yourself. And then we'll come back together in just a moment. Yeah, a lot of great collaboration being described in the chat. That's awesome. And I think that that institution-wide level, and making sure that folks who have a vested interest are part of those conversations is hugely important. And that bridge, that kind of way to bring all of these different folks together can be um, a really fitting way for the library to operate sometimes. So. Absolutely. I will hand us back over to Julia.
Fantastic. So a lot of the partnerships we've talked about so far are have been for us more at that broader conversation level, and in terms of like how are we going to figure out what to do? Who do we want to work with? What are the conversations happening on campus? And then, of course, that bridges into how do we actually interface with learners and what does that look like in terms of our day-to-day programming? And I think for us, early on when generative AI was coming more and more on the scene, we felt like there's not going to be a case where we're suddenly doing a ton of new workshops around AI tools in terms of bandwidth, in terms of student need. That felt like for us in our context, not the way forward. And so we wanted to continue to think about what are the pieces of our instructional programming that are already working well that we can weave some related things into without then feeling like we're creating whole new parts of our instructional programs. So one piece of that in particular has been our pop-up teaching programming. Post-COVID, we started experimenting with ways to reach students closer to where they were already in terms of like literally where they're walking by, as well as cognitively where they're at as well. We were feeling like people had so much going on and there was a lot of stress around any outside of class workshops or any big additions to the schedule. So how can we do things in smaller pieces has been something we've been experimenting with over the last few years. And so we'll set up a table in the library in a high traffic area in between class changes. We'll have some kind of incentive, often snacks, and then encourage students to focus on some form of reflection or small transferable skill building. And I've linked to a guide that has some more information on how we approach that programming in general. But for AI connections in particular, one thing that we've tried a few different iterations of now is helping people recognize generated images in different forms. And the core of the lesson is about using reverse image search tools to trace the origin of example images. So we do have to actively curate our example set so that it works with a reverse image search tool. But that has been a really useful way in for us. One, just because a lot of our students actually aren't aware of that strategy of what reverse image search can do. So that gets them into that. But then it also is an opportunity to bridge into broader questions and concerns about misinformation, about AI hallucinations, about quality sources in many different forms. And so some students will engage in different ways. Some folks see the snacks on the table and think, sure, I can stop by for a quick second, and they do their activity and they keep going. Some have really wanted to stick around and talk to us more in depth. So it's been a great opportunity to connect with students in different ways, and we have a facilitator guide with some more information there. We certainly need to update our images. That is something that has rapidly continued to change. And a lot of our image sets don't even accurately reflect how image generators have quickly advanced as well. This is something that we're continuing to play around with and iterate on. And I think a major benefit of the smaller lesson, mini lesson approach is that we can try something as a pop-up. We can also bring that same activity into the classroom as an icebreaker at the beginning of a longer instruction session, as something to do to bridge into those broader conversations. So we also, for another example, have an AI habits quiz, which is more of a reflection on where is automation coming up in lots of different places, whether that's you use facial recognition to unlock your phone or you let Spotify determine what music you're going to listen to. So helping students think about where that's coming into our digital lives in lots of different ways. We've had some good conversations about search engine overviews and their challenges and opportunities, as well as broader conversations about things like algorithmic personalization in news feeds and how we're getting our information. So we're continuing to think about what are these small pockets of things that we can integrate into our teaching. This is just a taste of lots of things. This is a conversation that we could definitely have more in depth. I'm happy to share if anyone has more particular questions, but we'll pause here for another reflection moment. Are there places within your existing programs that might be low-hanging fruit for engagement with learners about AI, whether that's a new teaching strategy you're trying, a new partnership that you have, a long-term partnership that you've built up over time, and what could that look like in just a small piece? Okay, and I will kick it back to Kayla for thinking forward.
Perfect. Yeah, so with all of these thoughts in our last a little bit under 15 minutes together, we want to pull some of these threads together for you and hopefully give you some things to consider as you move forward from here. And thinking about this familiarity and as Julia was just saying, how we can build on kind of what you're already doing. Let's think about your role. So you already, next slide, please. You already understand how knowledge is created, shared, and evaluated, right? This is work that we've been doing in lots of different ways for a long time. It's one of our foundational pieces. You help people find, use, and make sense of information. That's also what we're doing here. Your contextual knowledge adds essential value to the learning experiences that you offer to learners, to patrons more broadly. And the same skills used in reference interviews apply to AI. So, clarifying questions, probing for needs, guiding exploration. You don't have to have all of the answers, and you don't want to provide all of the answers to the patron, right? The act of helping them follow their curiosity and learn how to learn in this slightly different context is something that you already have significant experience doing, and so do your colleagues. So, as you're thinking about next steps, how you're going to plug some of these things in your context, we really want you to remember that your role isn't changing. You already know how to do a lot of this. It just looks a little bit different. So we'll share a little bit about our next steps. And so these really kind of tie back into some of the examples that we've used. Making explicit connections between offerings and AI related needs. So signposting that, fact checking in broad terms is something that we've done for a long time. And pulling some of those more familiar threads into AI related conversations is absolutely doable. And that's one of the things that we're thinking about. Um, More actively incorporating AI literacy and embedded instruction. So, as Julia mentioned, those mini lessons, there are lots of ways to potentially weave those in specific areas. But we also, like many of you, uh, are already seeing instructors asking explicitly for more of this sort of instruction to be front and center in some of their classes. And it will continue to be the case as more of our discovery tools incorporate AI, sometimes very explicitly, sometimes a little bit more under the hood. So incorporating that AI literacy into instruction has to happen. And then the last of our next steps that we're highlighting here is collaborating with these campus partners to influence the design of, in our case, required training. There's a training that is being tested this summer for a rollout this fall with some of our colleagues in Telos that we mentioned before. Uh, that is, it would be very tempting for it to be very technical in nature. And with our experience and our backgrounds, we're able to push it a little bit more toward this literacy conversation. And that is an area that we have experience and expertise in, and so do you, that folks who may be doing IT training on a daily basis may not. And so that's absolutely something that you could bring to the table there. So pulling these next steps and where we go from here into a few final questions before we fully open up the floor. So definitely feel free to put things in the Q&A or in the chat for us to respond to as we wrap up after these reflection questions. Where do you see opportunities for your own next steps? If you aren't drawing on a specific framework already, maybe, what learning objectives or goals do you have or have you had that might align with this sort of AI literacy work? And then finally, if you don't have specific partners in mind, as we were having that conversation, who can you brainstorm with for your own next steps? Are there folks that you work with on a regular basis who might be able to sit down with you and help you make a list of folks that you could reach out to continue to pull this work through other things that are already happening in your context? So again, we'll take about a minute, give folks a chance to put some things in the chat if they'd like and add things to the Q&A, and then we'll come back together for questions. All right, if folks take a moment to finish up thoughts that you might be jotting down, and yeah, we will open the floor up for questions and loop Anna back in to facilitate.
Just me sitting here looking at all your slides and copying things over. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to give everybody some more time to post their comments and questions into chat or to the Q&A. I'm going to loop us back around to a question in the chat, which I think Sarah actually did she linked to and mentioned the ACRL sandbox and also Project Core already, but just to see if you guys have anything else to offer. So the question was, do you find any good, or do you have any good like frameworks about evaluating AI responses that we can use to teach students about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Leo Lowe also has a framework. He's out of UVA. I can track that down. I don't have my mind on how what he calls that or how he frames that, but looking at some evaluative terms. I'm also really honestly looking forward to Mike Caulfield's talk tomorrow and thinking about how SIFT does or doesn't address some of these things. That's something that's been on my mind a lot. So I'm looking forward to guidance from him and what he's thinking about. I do think there's some degree to which, some of the broader questions that we long encourage people to ask about the media and information they're engaging with still does apply to some degree, depending on what you're looking at. So that's also a challenge too, I think, in terms of are we talking about like an answer from a chatbot? Are we talking about an image or something that someone has created and put out there? And how does that shift as well? Curious if other folks have resources to share. It's an
Yeah, I think
ongoing challenge for sure.
yeah, I was going to say, I think Madison also just shared the framework for Leo Lowe's CARE framework.
Perfect.
And it looks like Regina is also sharing that as well. So there are a few frameworks out there right now, but also just to kind of plug back in terms of like how maybe some teaching assignments or just some ideas. I think Sarah again posted the ACRL sandbox and just Project Core for some of us who need to see like a lesson plan for helping us as well. So I am gonna go over and look at our Q&As and give that to us. So the first question is, I feel like a lot of administrators, faculties hope that librarians can teach students about AI, kind of like they want us to teach them about the library. How are they reacting to the mini lessons you're doing?
How are administrators reacting? Is that the question?
Administrators and faculty.
Faculty? Okay. That's a great question. And a goal I have is to get it in front of more administrators and faculty because our primary and first direction that we've gone in is more of the like how can we just get straight in front of students and see how they respond to many of these things in the hopes that that helps make the case to faculty and to administrators if we can say we interacted with this many students and here are some of the ways that we respond to that they responded to that. I think to some to some degree, and I'll ask Kayla to add on to this as well, but I feel like a lot of the more administrator conversations I've had are folks are just like, can we just do something? Like, so okay, if you're doing something, great. Like, let's keep running with that and see how that goes. But I'll see if Kayla wants to add any more to that.
I would say that that does speak to a lot of conversations that have been had over the last couple semesters. Um, but it's also I think it's a really salient point to draw that parallel between teaching them about the library and teaching them about AI, because that is similar, right? And there have been places for the last decade plus where conversations about that in the context of digital literacy, just teaching students how to be digitally literate, is not actually enough information for us to know what you need your students to know. So I think that's a really good question to be asking. And as we have more input on exactly what students need to know in these various contexts, I think we'll be better able to answer that.
Thank you. We have about 2 minutes left and we have two questions. So hopefully we can do that in time. So the first one was curious. What do the panelists think of the following statement? True or false? Or maybe a combination. A librarian can be fully AI literate without engaging in using generative AI tools.
I love this question, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't know if we'll have the same answer, and I think that's also useful. Um, I think true. You can get really far in your literacy without needing to be specifically in a tool. I think that literacy is, of course, like a moving target, and we're never like, yep, I checked the box. I am totally there. So there are things that I have learned from getting into a tool and saying, okay, I'm not super excited about this, to be honest, but I'm gonna see what this experience is like. And that certainly has influenced how I think about things. But I am much more in the range of I think we can get pretty far in literacy without having to be specifically in a tool. Kayla, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good kind of position, and I think that that's very reasonable. I think fully literate is a really interesting frame because it is such a spectrum, right? Like being fully literate with words is also very difficult for us to articulate, right? So I think if you have a clear understanding of how artificial intelligence works, regardless of whether or not you're using generative tools or any other artificial intelligence, I think you can be literate in a way that allows you to support others. But I do think that there are, like with anything else, if you've never done research, then talking to someone about how to do research is going to be much more challenging because you're not speaking from a position of experience. But you can still ask good questions.
Great. So we are at time, and so I really just want to say thank you so much to our two speakers. Thank you so much for all that information and also for sharing your slides with us in advance. And then thank you to everybody who was in the comments, linking to so many different resources and just kind of having this really great, diverse conversation. And we hope that everybody's enjoying Gale Conference. And Julia and Kayla, do you guys have any last minute words you guys want to offer before we end the session?
I think just that we would love to connect and talk more about all of these things and really appreciate everyone for being here and look forward to keeping in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah, please reach out. We'd love to hear what you're doing.